Looking for real, actionable leadership advice? You found it. This is the TEMSEA Leadership Coaching Call, where host Phil Sanderson, an experienced paramedic, healthcare administrator, and certified leadership coach, guides powerful discussions with seasoned leaders. Join us for in-depth conversations, ask your toughest questions, and gain insights you need to lead with confidence.
Well, that's our song. It says it's time to get started. It's another first Monday of the month. Boy, this new year, 2025, is already, we've got 1 month behind us. It is now February the 7th, and we've got a great guest today. No stranger to many of you. Looking forward to getting him on here in just a minute. And he's got a great topic to talk about. If you hadn't already, tell us where you're from. Leave us your name in the chat, your email for future communications. And don't forget to go to our YouTube channel, Tennessee EMS Educators Association, and subscribe. All of our podcasts as well as these Friday calls are posted there. Share them with others. And as David said earlier, don't forget to leave us a like. Give us a like in there so that we can get more coverage. Remember, we do these calls every first Friday of the month because the most important person you'll ever lead is yourself. You can also find our podcast that's hosted by Eric Kloss on Apple, Spotify, and as I said, the YouTube channel as well. Now, I want to make a pretty big and exciting announcement. On April the 4th is our 1 year anniversary of doing these calls. So we're going to have a special 1 hour episode. So on April the 4th, mark your calendar, invite your friends, invite us, your staff, as many folks as you can. But on April 4th, we're going to have a 1 hour episode, and all of the speakers, the guests that we had from March all the way back to last April will be on the call. So you don't want to miss that, because that's going to be some really exciting content. So much knowledge is going to be shared. We'll probably need more than an hour, but we'll try to get it all in. So please mark your calendars for April 4th and be sure and join us for that. So today we have with us David Blevins. He's the program director at Rome State Community College. He's also a state EMS board member for the state of Tennessee. He serves on the board for the National EMT Association. I won't steal any more of his accolades because he has a lot. We definitely appreciate him. He's a huge advocate for EMS in Tennessee. So David, man, you're going to be talking about intentional mentorship, and I'm looking forward to sharing that. But before we get started, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Thanks, Phil. It's an honor to be on here. It's a great topic and a great platform. So congratulations on your upcoming 1 year. I'm looking forward to that. It's humbling to be in the midst of some of those guests. As you said, I have the privilege of starting and here at Rome State every morning, where I am today. I use the story, everything that I have comes from my grandmother when it comes to this profession. She claims she got me into this profession. Some of them on here have heard this story. I was 8 years old when my family moved back from Southern California. I became her CPR dummy. Then I started carrying her CPR dummies as she got more and taught more classes. And then I became a CPR instructor. So I became the CPR dummy once again. And now I've come here. And so through some different ways, I've had the opportunity to have some pretty awesome encounters, and mentorship is one of those. And for me, it took a simple phone call to get into that area. But before we get started, I want to take a moment here. In our region, we had a tornado that touched down last night. Listening, our program has a communication system with all of our students, and we were listening. We had a lot that were out there working, but for all the communities affected, both in Tennessee and Kentucky and our surrounding areas, I know there were some fatalities, but our EMS professionals were out there working all night last night. I want to give them a moment of appreciation and keep them in our thoughts and prayers as they continue to work through all that devastation in the northeastern part of, or north central east, I guess is where we're saying, where all this hit. So I want to give them a shout out in those areas as well.
Yeah, thank you, David, because certainly we appreciate all the first responders, and as we all know on this call, there's no time off. When the worst of the worst happens, the first responders we depend on are the ones that go out the door while everybody else is staying in shelter. So definitely appreciate those individuals. Thanks for
Right.
recognizing them. So, David, let's get into this intentional membership, mentorship. Tell us a little bit about that, and let's go.
Well, like I said, I got into this profession because of my grandmother, and you want to talk about the best mentor. She did this for many years, but it wasn't until many years later I got involved in several different aspects and was being pulled in a few different directions. I had a ton of people that I called on. Phil, you've been one of those throughout the years as well, but it wasn't to the point I said, I need some help. And we all listened to leadership books, and they were talking about the mentorship process, and it basically engaged the fact that I needed to, like, I was on the road and almost needed to pull off and stop if it wasn't for busy intersection. Like, I can remember I was under the bridge on Cedar Bluff in East Tennessee, and it hit me. And at that moment, I made a phone call. Actually, I sent a text first. Hey, you got a moment? And I made a phone call, and I stopped and I asked this individual. I said, "Hey, you've been a great friend and a purveyor of information, but I've got a personal question I need to ask you." And he's like, "What's that?" I said, "Would you be willing to sit down with me on a regular timeline and just pass on your information?" And he he took that. He's like, that is an awesome conversation, and that started that. And since that day, there's a couple that I have had, and we're going to break today down into two, being a mentor and a mentee. But there's a couple of individuals that I've called, and for a variety of topics, and we just get together either by text or by phone, or as we've talked about, sometimes we just have to call for tacos. It's time for tacos, which is our point, that we need to sit down and actually have a conversation. But as we talk about this, I'll talk two different aspects specifically, and that's one, being a mentor. But I also use this from the movie Money Never Sleeps, which is the second of the movie chain Wall Street. There's a line that says, every point in time, somebody needs to have a mentor and a protege, and that's the mentor-mentee relationship. You should have somebody that's mentoring you, and you should mentor somebody else. And I think that's the true definition of intentional mentorship. So when we look at mentorship itself, it's just a relationship. And that's all this is a relationship that's built on making you either professionally or personally better. And personally, I don't think those are separate. If you're better personally, you're better professionally. If you're better professionally, you're better personally. And these are two areas in which they're very symbiotic. If one fails, they both fail. So that's what we're hitting today.
Yeah, well, that's spot on. I mean, you got to have that relationship, and I know we're going to get into this, but I think one thing that's really important is picking the right mentor, because there are a lot of people in this world who want to share their opinions, but they may not be right on the way you need to be going. So tell us a little bit about what's the role of the mentor. What should we be thinking about when we're looking to find a mentor? What would be that role that we should ask them? Yeah.
So as we start that, I want everybody kind of thinking a little bit about both. So one, as you mentioned, that seeking of the mentor, but also as being a mentor. So what does that mentor need to be? So your ultimate goal is to make sure that your mentee has the ability to grow. You're guiding them in those different areas. Now, there are some individuals that want to sit down and create a lesson plan, right? We have, for these calls and stuff like that, we put notes together, and that's great. Sometimes it's just a download of information, right? Going into a mentoring session with something in mind, but then a question gets asked. So ultimately, that role, you're guiding them, you're supporting them and challenging them. So that's where I think is key. We can download the information, but Phil, I need you to do something with this. I don't pass this on. You need to pass it on, or you need to put that into play. And part of that's just by simply sharing insights from our experience. So why are we picking our mentors? or why have we been picked as a mentor? Chances are there's something in our life that we have done that then is good for somebody else. So somebody sees us out there doing something. Some of the roles that we've done. Phil, you've been in leadership of many different agencies, field operations, statewide leadership. And somebody goes, "Hey, I like what Phil has done. I want to get there. Phil, download it into me." Now, I am going to say one thing that you made. You're like, we want to pick the right people. We can learn from everybody. So if there's somebody that's doing something wrong, learn from what they're doing as well. But ultimately, as a mentor, we're a sounding board, not just an instructor. If you want an instructor, you want somebody just past knowledge. Find a leadership class. You can go to Maxwell. You can go to Franklin Covey. You can go to some schools that have leadership principles. I see them regularly from Harvard Business School, and you can go to these classes. They're going to download information, but you're ultimately there to say, "Hey, that's a great idea, but have you thought ... and fill in what that dot is."
Yeah, yeah. David, we've talked, I like what you talked about, you've already kind of mentioned a little bit. You can have, a formal mentor, you can have an informal mentor, but that formal mentorship is, something that's structured, asking someone to serve, like you just said, setting goals and defining expectations. And that's the real deal right there. So, if anybody here on our call or a mentee is looking to really grow, to get ahead, finding that formal mentor who's someone who holds you accountable and gives you some very clear expectations is very vital to your next step and your growth, in leadership or whatever it is you aspire to be. Um, Tell us a little bit about as a mentor, if you want to be a mentor to someone, what's some effective strategies? And like you got to be approachable, right? You got to be available. Tell us about that.
So we're busier than ever these days. Like the amount of paperwork we used to in the past, it was everything in triplicate. Now we're doing everything 3 times, different things that are out there. So time is of the essence. But you get into this relationship, um, the goal is you need to be available. Now, things happen, right? And I told you, code for one of my mentors is time for tacos. We'll text, usually get something on the books pretty quickly. And both of us have had to cancel here recently. But it's like, "Hey, can't do today. Can you look at next Wednesday and be there?" So, as you mentioned, be approachable. So come on in, make the phone call. My door's open. Most people know how to get a hold of me. It's funny, my phone goes off all the time. So be approachable, but be available. It's like, if you keep, "No, Phil, can't do it this, February call," and you're like, "Well, let's do March." "No, I can't do March." Okay, February, March, April. "No, I can't do April." "Well, you're not going to ask me about May, June, and July because you're done with me," right? So like you turn that off. But and this is something I've had to learn. My mentors have been great and they've poured into me. But when I look at the other side, people using me as a mentor, I've got to stop and listen, right? So if I'm talking all the time, that individual on the other side is like, "Well, he's just downloading, he's instructing." And again, we want to pull that back and be that sounding board. So be willing to just shut up and listen on occasion. It's something that's key. And then constructive. Now, there's a lot of people these days that don't like the negative side, right? And we tend to stay away from that, but we learn a lot. In fact, I use the term fail as an acronym versus a word itself. Fail is first attempt in learning. And so as a mentor, I need to be able to provide constructive feedback. I don't, "Hey, Phil, you're wrong." It's like, "Hey, we got into this experience. What got you there?
Mhm.
I did this and this. Have you thought about this? This is a way that we can do that." But as we talk about kids, kids learn how to walk by failing, right? They start to crawl and they fall. They get back up, then they go to the next level. And if we took that away from them, they would never walk. And so now we're trying to help them. So provide them feedback, even if it's the negative side, even if it's pointing out a failure. But how do we learn from that? Michael Jordan has this thing. It's like, I missed more than 9,000 shots in my career, but those 9,000 shots got me to this spot. And obviously he's done pretty well. Now, encourage independence. If I'm saying, "Phil, I am your only mentor, only come to me." No, because I've got one facet of that. We take a look at everybody that's on this call today. everybody. I love, I look at the names like Gerald Foon. Every chance I get to hear him and download from him, great. Lee Blair and Eric and Katie and Tanya and Jason Fox, like the number of people on this call, Robert Davis, like they have embedded into me. But as a mentor, if I say, hey, you could only come to me, then we set you up for failure, Phil. You need to be listening, downloading, encourage that independence, get out and do, and just take mine as an input to help you grow. Clear expectations. So one thing, we know that there are some people that are out there, and this is whether you're a mentee looking up to your mentor or you're a mentor. What are your relationships and your boundaries? Like, yes, we'll talk, we'll text, we'll go out, but just know, like after 10 o'clock in the evening, like, hey, let me download. I gotta stop and come off. So set those expectations kind of early on what to expect. Because again, going back to that very first part about being available, um, I'm probably not going to have a chance to meet with you every single day, probably not every single week. Our goal for tacos is once a month. We haven't done that since the beginning, probably since we started about 6 years ago. That's probably been about quarterly that we work that out, but we probably talk once or twice a week in the meantime, other ways. So lay those expectations out, what we're going to try to do, and then you build around that to make sure you're available right.
Yeah, that's some good feedback on being a mentor because, it's not an easy job. I mean, when you want to really pour into someone, you got to have a passion. You got to have it in your heart. If you don't feel passionate about mentoring someone, then please just say no. Don't waste your time and the mentee, the individual who's desiring to hear what you have to say. If it's not a passion, if it's out of your way or off your schedule or whatever, just pass and ask them to find somebody else. So that kind of leads us in being a mentee. Gosh, these calls go by so fast. I say it every month. So we're getting down to the last half here. So David, walk us through being a mentee. If we want to, and all of us should desire to want to be a mentee. We may be very experienced and well diverse, but we all have something to learn. So tell us about being a mentee.
We come up with something new almost every day. We look at the available content that is out there. It is being generated, and the data that's available today is greater than no other generation. But we're not inventing anything new. All of this stuff has come about. It's just we may be coming up with a newfangled version of it. It's electronic now versus a manual, or all this different stuff. So there's people that have been there before. I use the analogy. You go to Seattle, Washington area, SeaTac area, and they have the highest cardiac arrest survival rate in the nation. Why? Gosh, you're learning CPR from the time you come out of the birth canal up there, and they have those high cardiac arrest survival rates. Why would we do something different anywhere else? They teach people. They have AEDs out there. Las Vegas took it over and started working on it in their area as well. Why? Because they didn't want people to die on their floor and drop their gambling. So they taught people. They have a replicatable system that's out there. So as a mentee, I should seek an opportunity to learn from those that have done it before. As I mentioned earlier, either the good or the bad. Because, how do we learn not to kill somebody? We see people that have done it before and what have happened to them, right? So we don't want to do that anymore. So as a mentee, take ownership and go, hey, I want to be better. And in our EMS field, this can be from the field providers that are out there. You're looking up to a senior provider or to a junior provider that's had different opportunities because they've been in another area. Aeromed services, educators, administrators. Find your path, what direction you want to go. Because as Phil mentioned just a minute ago, if you don't want to be a mentor, don't. You may think you want to be an ambulance service director. You may think you want to be a paramedic program director or a like our state office director in Director Ward. Call them. Hey, can I hang out with you for a day and learn? Because you may realize that's not the path I want to go on. So take that ownership of what you want to do. Find those people out there that you can plug into. And then when they're there, take their information, show appreciation because Phil, you're taking half an hour out of your day to do this. I appreciate that. You're passing along information. and makes you feel better, then you want to go on and do that March call or that April call. So show them some appreciation throughout.
Yeah, very good information. And just a simple, I have my mentors as well, and sometimes just as simple as buying your lunch. Say, hey, give me an hour of your time, I'll buy your lunch. Whatever gratitude you can do for them. Buy the tacos, as you say. you know, but the most important thing is a mentee is just like the mentor is to be actively listening, because we all have a lot of things going on in our day, and it's not and this is a this these conversations are, yeah, while they're great in fellowship and catching up, but they're really meant for both parties to grow in wherever they're at. So take that and do something with it. We talked about in our conversations, what's it like to be in a great mentor, being prepared. We're actually getting down to the point now where it's time for folks to put in for questions. But David, while folks are kind of thinking about their questions, tell us about, some strategies for being a great mentee.
Well, you made mention there, so we can make this super quick. Listen, engage. When you get done, and I've done this more than once, whether it's on your iPad or you have a pad, something, most people, like I do have paper and pen right here in case you say something I need to follow up on, I'm going to write down. But in that session, be engaged, download as soon as you get done. These are the nuggets that were said, and you're going to follow up on to actually be able to take that information and go on. Now, that information will turn on to you being a mentor later on. So make sure and have that thought process you're going to download as soon as you get done. You said be prepared, respect them, and they're going to be good. But just it's that intentionality to say, hey, I'm going to listen. I'm going to have a couple of key points back there. You always have some questions in the background in case things get quiet. Now, when you're eating tacos, obviously you got to pause just a minute to eat some tacos, but it does take a while. So be prepared with some questions. But again, be ready to download that information. So when you come back, you can do some deep dives on some of those nuggets there later on.
Yeah, it's something I try to do is I try to think about when it's leading up to that time when I know I'm going to have the opportunity to talk with someone who is a mentor. Go ahead and put your questions down in your notes app or your paper or whatever it is you use, because again, you don't want to get there and be stumbling with what your thoughts are. Have that already laid out. Put your thoughts in, your notes app or whatever you like to use, and when you get there, be prepared to have that conversation. That
And
way you won't forget.
don't be afraid to let that out ahead of time, right? We're not,
Mhm.
this isn't a gotcha, especially with our mentors. We don't want to be like, hey, I'm going to catch you. No, like, hey, Phil, I really need some conversation on one of these topics here. Would you care to fit that in? And so, Phil, you can do a little bit of prep work before coming to our session, right?
Mhm.
And then that way you guide a little bit more and you help. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, folks, it is 23 after the hour, and on the central side of the world. If you're on the eastern side, it's 8:23. But go ahead and start putting your questions in the chat if you like to ask David, and we'll get those questions for him. Let me just open up the chat room here. Okay, go ahead and start putting those in there. But while we're thinking about it, David, you know, great conversation today. Yeah, I say this every month. We need to make these calls several hours long, but unfortunately we can't. That's why I encourage folks coming back the next month. So we uh we have a question here. It says it's asking, speak a little bit about the importance of listening and willingness to hear feedback. That is a fantastic question, and that's so important, because if you don't listen and be willingness, then it's a waste of everybody's time. Go ahead.
So I'm going to take the end of that just a little bit before I begin with the first. So we have to not be scared to know that there's a problem. I liken this, you take a look at the hospitals, they have a registry for when errors occur. And that's for them to learn from, right? It's like, hey, something happened. A judgment was made, errors happen. Obviously, there's catastrophic errors, but errors happen. And we should turn that around to make us better. You talk about these national champion football programs and basketball programs and all that. Like they go through and watch film. They're not watching film of them making a game-winning shot. They're going back to what happened in the 60 minutes before that to say, if we would have fixed here, we wouldn't have had to wait till that last second for this shot to go in. Let's fix here. Let's win by 20, right? We don't want to dwell on that bad area, but we do want to look at it and make ourselves stronger going forward. So that to turn around, I have to be open to Phil going, hey, David, you screwed the pooch. It's done. Now, just like if we bring a problem, we want to bring a solution, same thing here. This is what I saw. Now, I as an individual should be willing to take it. Now, my mentor will deliver that in a way, it's like, hey, this happened. And I don't think it was necessarily good. So let's find that. But as a mentee or as an individual, as a leader, we can use all these different codes. As a person, I should be willing to listen to somebody to say. And the worst thing I ever heard was was in a store and somebody's kid was crying and somebody goes, why don't you just spank, or not crying, but they did something wrong. It's like, why don't you spank him? It's like, I just don't want to hear him cry. Yeah, it's uncomfortable. But how's that individual going to learn not to do something at that point where that negative feedback is there? So we need to learn, we need to grow. And by doing that, we have to stop for a second, hear what you're trying to say, and note that you're trying to say it in a way that's going to make me better. And with that feedback should take us to the next level.
Yeah, and I'll add one more thought to that. The mentor's job is to challenge the mentee.
Mm-hmm.
So be open to what they're saying. Don't automatically say, oh, I can't do that or that won't work. Be open to that. Give that some thought. Because it's so easy to say, oh, I can't, that's not. Be open to that. So that goes to another question here. We've got time probably for one, maybe two questions here. How do you as a mentee how do you strike a balance between giving mentees, guiding mentees and allowing them to discover solutions on their own? So as a mentor, how do you have that balance of guiding the mentee and also allowing them to discover those solutions on their own? Because you want to, as a mentee, you want to say, hey, do it this way, A, B, C, D. This is what worked for me.
Right. Well, and that goes back to that challenge that we talked about earlier, right? So there are some things that based on time, the time that we have with somebody or the deadline that may be, necessary, we may just have to say, hey, I know the direction you're heading, not the direction we need to head. You need to head down this path. So sometimes in that whole process, we say this is where we need to go. But for the most part, if we get the individual to the right place, like I can give you a fish and you can eat for the night, right? You teach a man to fish and things, you feed him for life. So note, you've got to back up and start to say, hey, I need you to grow. I know the answer to this, but I want you to find the path and kind of guide them on that goal. Because teamwork, another acronym, together everyone achieves more. We all are working together. We end up eating for life versus having a good fish.
Yeah, spot on. Well, Lee, our producer, says it's 2 minutes to the end. Regardless, he keeps us on time. I love it. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining. Some key takeaways today. Be as a mentor or a mentee is purposeful guidance. As a mentor, you got to have that purposeful guidance. As a mentor and mentee, there's got to be a mutual commitment between you both. And it's like David talked about, set a schedule and get it done. There's got to be that support. You got to have empowerment. And then there's also got to be a two-way learning street. So there's some key takeaways from this session. Please join us next month, March the 7th. We are going to have another exciting call with our guests. So we're looking forward to that. And don't forget to reach out and let us know what we can do better. We want to hear from you. Many of you attend every single month. You are a part of our family here. We want to hear how we can do this better. Please like us on YouTube, share it with others. We want to grow this presence. Our 1-year anniversary is coming up in April. Don't miss that 1-hour episode. And remember, we do this every day because the most important person you'll ever lead is yourself. Thank you all for joining. Thank you, David. This was a great session. I appreciate everything you joined. Everybody have a wonderful Friday and a weekend. Thanks.